Get this ready. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We have a very special guest today, Mrs. Alyssa Trujillo.
She the best music.
This is my jam. We start off. This is The Week After.
Shoot, son. That is sick. Dang. That's the best intro I've ever had on a podcast. This is also the only time I've been on a podcast.
Let me fix my cone head for a second, please. There we go. Sweet.
You didn't fix it. You're a conehead.
I'm
but
not
it's okay.
It's okay.
It's a choice that you make.
Exactly. All my choices I make are my choices.
And that leads us to couples counseling.
Okay, so today's topic and today's discussion that we want to bring up is a little bit about marriage, or a lot about marriage. And I brought my wife in for this, so you don't hear just from my perspective. But it's how you handle conflict in a marriage. How you handle conflict in a marriage. I think that's simple.
And I'd like to start by saying that Jeremiah and I are not experts at handling conflict in marriage. We just have a lot of practice at it.
Practice makes perfect, they say. And conflict in our marriage, we're still work in progress.
But we both, I feel like, come to each other often saying, like, I think we handled that really well. I feel like I heard you and understood you. I feel like you heard me and understood me. And we don't have conversations that we come away with bitterness or feeling misunderstood and just bottling it up. It's very like, we are very good about, I think, just communicating well. And not that we always agree, but that we at least come away having resolved something.
And there's not that, like you said, that tension is in the home. We work on, like, whatever we need to work on, we work on it now. And it takes, now I'm not saying now as in like minutes by minutes, like this very moment, but this is the conflict. Let's address it. Let's deal with it and make it happen.
Yeah.
Work through it.
Yeah. And that's that kind of, I guess, to start out our, like, a preface about us and our story and our personalities. Jeremiah, you are non-confrontational. You are like, let me just let myself be wrong or be wronged or whatever it is, because you just don't want to talk about it. I feel like I would say you started out that way and you're a lot better now.
Yeah, I feel like I'm like that way with most people besides my wife and the ones I know closest. Right? I feel like I put on this, like, I don't want to affect this relationship because they're not necessarily married to me. So they don't have to live with me. Not
necessarily, no.
They don't have to live with me. But I when you get married, I feel like there's this comfortability that comes along with the way you normally handle things, and you go kind of opposite sometimes with your spouse.
And it's so interesting, huh? Because I've seen that with you, where I'm like, this is your personality type, but with me, you don't do that. Whereas my personality is a lot more like, let's just figure this out right now. Like, what's the problem? And I don't want to sit in this weirdness. I don't want to sit in this, like, I know you're upset. So just tell me how you feel so we can work through it and then, like, get over it and move past it and let's do that. And in a moderate amount of time. I wouldn't say, like, I probably used to push you a lot more to be like, what is it? What is it? What's wrong? What's wrong?
Definitely.
And I still want to know, but I think I'm more on the side of, like, okay, like, you just need time, but we're still going to talk about it.
Yes, exactly. So I wanted to bring you in because we have experience with conflict. I wanted to just have an encouraging just an encouraging talk to say, this is how we work through it. This is how the freedom in our marriage to work through it. This is how we don't lose that aspect of, like, you don't respect me and I respect you, or when our pride gets in the way. So just to hop that out, just jumpstart on that. When we are confronted with conflict, so example, this is a common example that still happens to our day, is I get hungry when I don't eat, hangry, as my wife says, and many others. And so in that situation, I come home and I'm hungry And at first, I would go through slamming the doors, opening, walk past the kids, walk past my wife. Where's food? And or I would just go shut down and then sit there and wallow and just say, "Leave me alone." And then Alyssa comes beside me and says, "Are you angry?" And I say, "No." And then I eat and I'm back to normal. So when we first were married, that was like a tough transition because I was so used to in my ways, and then Alyssa to come correct me in the moment of that hangriness and that moment of like I'm focused, and that moment I'm like I just want to fulfill my need, and for her to come talk to me like that, and my pride just was bubbling up because of the other tensions, and I would speak to her in a way that was not appropriate. It was like leave me alone or not very kind or loving as the person you see today. And so, but that is what kind of that conflict, this is where we started to address it because Alyssa's like, it's not okay that you talk to me like that. It's not okay. You can't use that as an excuse. Figure it out. Take a snack to work. It's your responsibility in that moment to work on that. And after conversations, me after like taking that in and actually sitting down and listening without being like, I'm fine, you don't know me, like, so excited me like that's me molding out of my skin, like the old flesh is dying away, but that's the whole thing about our marriage is that she had the confidence to come to me to say, you know what, I don't want to continue to live like this, and I don't care if it's gonna backlash at me. I don't care what the consequences are. I'm trying to push my husband toward holiness. Was that what's going through your mind, honey, when I was kind of going through those moments?
Yeah, absolutely. Because bigger than me, bigger than our marriage, even bigger than you as a father is like, are you a representation of Christ in this moment? Because that's what we agreed in our marriage vows and in our relationship, that we were going to push each other toward Christ likeness. And like I know that can sound like so holy cliche. It's like, are we called to holiness? Yes, we are. So we both have that standard with each other, where I think a lot of times, even with me, you do this where like we set ourselves aside and just say, where is Christ in this right now? And for you, for sure, that was something I did, was see you with this like gleam in your eye when you would come in, where I knew that you were hangry. It was this like look where it was like you were upset, you were going to be easily frustrated, and you would come in, you go straight to the kitchen and start, like you said, opening the doors, slamming the cabinets, trying to find food. Even frustrated at me if there was no food ready, even though it's like 3 p.m. or whatever. Um, yeah, so I would come to you and be like, "Hey, are you hungry?" And I think just saying that, I think immediately softens you, because you are you do possess humility in those moments. It's hard, but you're a humble person. And so for you to be like, "Oh," like even to this day when I ask you, "Are you hungry?" I feel like you don't even realize that that's why you're behaving that way sometimes, even though it happens every day.
That's the amazing thing. It's not like you've confronted me in the past about this just one time and I'm miraculously fixed, right? It's something that you continually
Which
work.
I did think was going to happen. And that was a frustrating moment where I was like, how many times have I told you you need to have a snack with
Till
you at all
death to us
times?
part.
How many times have I had to explain to you, like, try this, try this? And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you want a granola bar? Do you want this? Do you want that? And you're like, no, I'll be fine, or whatever. And you still would just choose. In my eyes, I was like, oh, he's just choosing not to address this problem. And then I am just always going to have to be the one who is taking on this load of like your anger and your frustration and all this stuff over something so preventable. And that was really hard for me. That was frustrating. And I think over time, I've grown to sort of like realize and accept a little bit that you're not going to be fixed immediately. And I think that you have gotten so much better. One thing that you do that I've always appreciated since you started doing this is like when you call me on the way home and you're like, hey, I just want to let you know, I love you so much. I'm super hungry.
I'm in the red zone.
I'm in the red zone. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Like, so I know when you come in the door that maybe you won't just sit down with us right away and me and the boys and just play. Like you're probably going to go straight to the kitchen, grab something to eat just so you can like neutralize the threat, right? And then you
And I think this is a key thing about this. This is something super silly, and maybe it wasn't silly at first, but I think it's a good foundation for what was to come in our marriage, the different kind of conflicts that was to arise in our marriage. And I just want to encourage, like, it's amazing to have a wife that's feeling the confidence to speak to me in a way that normally I feel like culturally wives don't speak to their husband, you know? And the reason I say culturally is because we look back in the 50s, right? You had the husband who would bring home the bread, you know, make the money. Wife would stay at home with the kids. The husband had his place and the wife had her place. And the wife didn't talk to the husband a certain way. And the husband, you know, just demanded respect. And I think that isn't so like there's some biblical things within that, and that's not wrong per se. But I think when we look at our marriage, like you are equal with me in power in our marriage. You are not. We have different roles and different responsibilities, of course. But when we make decisions and when we talk to others, when we make a decision, it's based on like we speak for each other, and not just when I speak, but when you speak as well. We kind of have that thought and ideal in our marriage, right?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely we do. I think we're like we definitely have a lot more equality than I think a lot of people probably sometimes as far as like what you said like those cultural standards because it's not just the 50s. It's it could just be if you're from a different area
Oh yeah,
or if you're from a culture that is more you know male authority and women submission regardless of like what knowledge or value or information a woman might bring. I think that you and I are a lot more like just we have more equality in
hmm
that. Um and it's based on our strengths, and
hmm
like us just knowing I will always defer to you for things that you have more knowledge about than I do. I'm not going to be like we're equal so I should have a say when I don't know what I'm talking about and you do the same thing. I think I'm very blessed to have like a husband who values things within me that I the strengths I have and like of course like I value so many things about you and your knowledge and stuff.
definitely.
So I think we've both been able to just like see that and acknowledge it, and that I think that was always very easy for us.
hmm
We've had our hiccups
Definitely.
where you'll say I'm the man and then I laugh and then you laugh.
Yes, exactly. And I think I want to stress that like it's not that one is better than the other. They're just different ways that we live. But I want to just speak to that, just say we need to encourage more husbands with humility and more wives with boldness. And maybe that's like a wrong statement, but
That's beautiful.
I think
I
well
love
just
that.
that boldness is like I love when my wife calls me out and we hear these cultural norms saying like, oh, the old ball and chain, oh, life sentence. And I really detest those things because like even though they're joking, there's always a little amount of truth in that, right? That's what they say. And so I would say that like let's get rid of that and let's start treating our spouses with they are just as in the spirit and love the Lord just as much I am, hopefully, that they can do that. And I'm not saying call your spouse out in a way that's like if I come home hungry or like I'm doing something, this is like, hey, your attitude's crappy. And you literally suck right now as a husband, and you really need to go take a break with Jesus. Never like that. You're not. There's not. It's just this tone that she has. We talk about tone in our home sometimes, where we say, "Watch your tone." Watch the way you say it. I grew up kind of with that with my dad, and the key thing there is that when she comes to me, she usually when she says, "Hey, I don't like your attitude. I don't like the way you're speaking. You're something's off. You need to go be with Jesus. You need to go pray it out. Go right now." And she might be in a whirlwind. She might be the kids are crazy, everything like that. But if I'm not centered with Jesus, it just throws her off even more. It's even more of a damage than than me even being there. So the good thing is that she felt confidence, and sometimes I receive that very like, okay, I will. And other times I'm like, let me stomp off to my bedroom and pout my feet like a 2-year-old, And that's that adjusting that her priority is not me to be happy, but me to be holy. Right there, right? And so I do get that. I just want to give her praises for that. And I want to challenge women and wives specifically to be able to speak to their husband when they're not acting holy. And when their response is not of one of like, thank you for correcting me, or yes, I do need a timeout and pray with Jesus. It's more like, you don't talk to me like that. Whoa, 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 whoa. Like, and they
At
become
that point, you're valuing the respect over your own Christ-likeness. And you're putting the structure of what you think a family structure should be over having a kingdom structured household with Christ at the head. So like we were saying, we're bringing this all back to scripture. Like, this isn't just you and I with our progressive liberal thoughts on what a marriage should look like. This is like you and I saying, I want to be like Christ. You want to be like Christ. We want each other to be like Christ, and we are partnering together and walking hand in hand toward that goal, knowing that we both have to work on it and that we agreed that we would be able to call each other out. So like,
that's the first
you have
thing.
a spouse who is not on that page and on that wavelength, maybe a spouse who's like a new believer or something like that, or just didn't grow up with this or that, or grew up with a certain hierarchy in the house. Like, that can be hard. That can be hard to do. But Jeremiah, you and I have an agreement that when we are not being holy, that we will tell each other in love, because our holiness always takes precedent over me feeling respected, or me feeling like you need to just like let me be how I am or whatever. Like, we want to reiterate that, like, we're not just coming up with this stuff. Like, it's definitely what I think what Christ wants from us. And like, I hope, like, wives, that we don't, just because even if our husbands, are fully functioning as the full head of the household with decision making, and in every way just being the head of that, that's great. But I hope that we as wives will always first care more about pushing our husbands towards Christ, even when, and when that husband is not being Christ-like, regardless of any kind of structure, with respect and love.
Definitely. I think that's the key thing, kind of that steps of agreeing about this, starting off marriage. Maybe that's a conversation you need to have. I'm not saying you should start calling out your husband if you've never done it before, but maybe it's that could blow up. But just or why husbands calling out your wives, if you've never done that before. It's both ways, right? I call you out on some things too. I know we point to me because I'm.
Well, I mean, and it goes the same for me. Like, that was one example, is like something that we deal with really frequently is when you're hungry and it affects your mood. But I mean, I have things all the time, and I will say that you have so much more humility than I do in those situations, because I'm kind of a person where, like, you tell me something and my immediate reaction is just defense of it. But I just need to chew on it for a minute and then come back and be like, okay, you're right. Like, I didn't respond well, or okay, you're right, I didn't do that. But it's one of those things like that I want to work on receiving
100%.
in the moment. I'm not very good at receiving in the moment of my anger. And I feel like that's probably really common with a lot of people. But yeah, like that you and I always, I feel like, have the ability to tell each other, hey, I think something's going on with you. You're off. Like, why don't you go take a minute, be with Jesus,
Definitely.
calm down. For me, a lot of times it looks like me telling you, like, can you just sit with the boys? I'm going to go wash some dishes. And then I just like pray. That's like a way that I can decompress, is washing dishes and just like praying.
Praise Jesus for that. So no, and I think so. That's a couple steps. So one thing is agree with your husband, go walk through it and have that hard conversation. Then secondly, I was going to say is that there was a second point. I was going to talk about, you agree with your husband, you go through grace, you have grace upon grace upon grace. I lost it.
It's all right.
No, it's not all right. It was right there. Just kidding. And let me just think about this. Do you have anything else you would like to say?
I mean, I just think that, like I said, we're not experts. We just know what works for us. One other good tool if you want me to throw in another tool that I tell people all the time, like whether we're doing counseling or just giving people like our advice on conflict resolution, is something you and I did really early on, which was we made like safe words.
Yes.
And we used codes for each other. So for example, like the one that we use all the time is let's start over. And that's the biggest one that you and I agreed when we were not fighting. We agreed, hey, if one of us ever says, hey, can we start over? That we will wipe the slate clean from that conversation. We're going to wipe away emotions, implications,
whatever
reactions, no matter what was there. We're going to start over and just do it differently and do it better and try again. And we agreed on that. And so it's not like, you snap at me and I'm like, hey, we're going to start over. And then you just are like, no, we're going to talk about it. It's that we agreed on it and it works and it's super great.
And that's that came to my second point that I was going to make, was another thing that we say is same team.
We do.
We say same team. Because you have to remember that you are not the enemy. Your husband or spouse are not the enemy. They're not against you. They're for you. They're your biggest champion. My wife is my biggest champion and friend. Yeah. And and that rolls into like when you go in agreement that you know that you want to call each other out to be holy like Christ, it's knowing that it may hurt, but this is my friend. We are on the same team. We're striving to Christ. And that will get you through a lot of conflicts, I believe. We have dealt with serious things in our marriage that we can talk about in another podcast, but we've done some serious things other than hangry that really relied on this, calling each other out and being holy, allowing me to humble myself, allowing me to take away my pride, take away my well, am I good? I'm doing the best I can, and I'm a good father. Alyssa brings this up, because she brings this up sometimes because I had this emotional reaction in the past of if she addressed one thing in my life, I applied it that I'm not a good father, I'm not a good husband, and I put all this weight behind it.
And I'm like, no, I just wanted you to take out the trash.
Exactly. And so in marriage, as we walk through that, I have to realize, I have to take a step back and recognize she's not putting those things on me, and as you're married with a person longer and longer, you have a relationship, you do have history, and God calls us to let love does not account wrongs, right?
Love keeps no record of wrongs.
Love keeps no record of wrongs. But we say, oh yeah, it's so easy, until it's not. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not remembering it day to day, but it's when my wife says, hey, your shoes are untied, and you blow up about
you always criticize me.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do love that we always say same team.
Same team.
And that's something that I feel like I've often been more reluctant with receiving sometimes, more so than you. I feel like you're very good at you are like one of the most gracious people, and I say that because I'm very critical of people a lot of times, which I'm working on, and you are so gracious. And it's something about you just say, we could be arguing in the car on the way somewhere, and we're about to walk in and be with a group or whatever, be with family or whoever it is, and arguing, and I get frustrated and I just get quiet and look out the window or whatever. And you reach out and say, hey, same team. And I just want to be like, no, not until you say that you're wrong and you apologize and you da-da-da-da-da. But the most important thing in that moment is regardless of whatever's happening, that we are not enemies. Mm-hmm. And especially when we go out to be with other people, that we are unified. And that's huge for us. That's something you and I value. Yeah. How awkward is it when you walk in somewhere and you can tell that this couple's just been fighting?
Hey, don't call people out right now. It happens to us too. And so there's just some amazing little tidbits about our marriage, guys. And we're not saying that we have all the answers, but God has just placed a couple things in our lives that have encouraged us and encouraged others. And so just speaking to you guys, conflict is okay to have.
In whatever type of marriage you have. Maybe you are all for that, the hierarchy and the complementarian marriage, mm-hmm. and the very, different roles and all that stuff. Like, God bless you. God blesses that. He blesses what you and your spouse are, like, if you guys are seeking biblical truth, that's what you're doing.
Exactly.
But it's something that I think God, even more so than anything else, he just wants us to be like him.
Yeah.
And that's
And
how we have applied it.
She, like I said before, she's more important. I am more important to her holy than happy. If I'm going to look like Christ, that's going to implement my fatherhood, my husbandry,
Husbandry.
I just said right. So, well, everyone, that's just a quick little tidbit of everything we talked about. I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Did I cut you off a little bit early?
No. I hope that no one comes at me for.
At me, bro. No, I think call me out. Call each other out. Spouses,
but hey, if
call
you
each other
think I'm
out.
not being holy, come at me. I want it.
Bring it. Watch my Netflix ratings.